Hello and welcome to St Michael's Hill. Today's video I'm going to be looking at the Railway Laser Lines Canton pump house building. A couple of months ago now I got in touch with Steve Smith and asked if he could put together a little kit for this building that I'd seen on Cardiff Canton. He went away and did it, which is great of him, and he's actually sent me the kind of first kit to test and basically put together a bit of a video on how I built it and what I think of it. Whilst I was very happy to and very much expecting to pay for this kit, Steve has sent it free of charge. I just want to make that very clear at the beginning of this video. There's no other affiliation. The link at the description is not an affiliate link, and I don't make any money from these kits. Here are all the pieces that come in the kit laid out. You can see the external brick sections, which have had the laser cutting brick effect. There's an internal skeleton structure. There's doors and windows and roof sections that all make up the kit. It's been precision cut with lasers, so everything fits together very, very nicely, and there's lots of kind of etched detail within it. This section is part of the roof detailing. The inside is basically a waste bit of material that's been cut, that's been left in for a bit of security. There's a section in the middle, which is the lintel for above the door. So keep hold of that. Also keep hold of the waste piece of material, as it's quite useful afterwards. You'll see that each of the pieces of the internal cladding have been labelled south, east, north and west. These sections point outwards and will be covered up by brick exterior. As you can see with this window, a lot of the detail has been already cut in by the laser. These parts are very fine. As you can see, the window is about 1 centimetre across and a lot thinner than that. So just go careful with them, they are fragile. With this kit, it's a good idea, like with many others, to do a dry fit before you get your glues out. This kit is fairly small and very, very well engineered, so it will actually stand pretty much fully formed without any glue at all. So it's a good job to put the kit together just to see how everything's going to work. Also, it gives you a chance to kind of see if there's any small sections that need filing back. Often with laser cut kits, where the parts have been held onto a larger sheet, there can be little burrs that just need to be filed off, which is very easy with these kits. Once you're happy with how everything's gone together, it's time to start priming the pieces. For the exterior cladding, I'm using a red primer. This is just a simple case of giving it light layers to make sure it goes on okay. For the concrete sections and the window panes, I'm going to be using Plastercoat suede paint. This is a great kind of base colour for any sorts of concrete or effects like that. I'll actually leave a link in the description below to where I get my Plastercoat suede from, but it's an invaluable paint that I'll be using a lot on the layout as we go. The roof sections I give a primer of grey. Again, this just gives a nice base kind of colour for effects that we're going to look at later. So the three main sections of the roof are given this priming. The internal sections on the inside, so this is the sections that will be kind of visible through the windows, are sprayed white. I also at this stage gave the doors a quick primer as well with the white paint. I haven't done it here, but it wouldn't be a bad idea to mask off all the sections that come out of the main body parts. You'll see why later. Once this is done, it's on to the base. There are two sections of the base, a 1mm and a 2mm section. Simply glue these together. It might be easy to use one of the side sections or a couple of them to hold everything aligned together and then clamp together so the glue dries without them moving. The next step is very much optional, but I have drilled a small hole in the bottom of the base. I mentioned before that you might want to mask off the lugs that stick out of the skeleton framework. The reason for that is when you prime them, it will add just a slight kind of guess, extra width on the pieces because of the paint. This will just make the whole thing not fit together quite so well. So in my case, I'm just filing them back. And it's an easy job to do with a small file, but you can do it either way really. You can either mask them off, which is probably recommended and a little bit easier, or take the extra time just to file them back, as you can see. And it really doesn't take much to kind of stop these kits fitting exactly perfectly because of the way they're cut. Then it's just a case of gluing everything together. Use squares to keep things square, and you can also use the roof to hold everything together whilst it's drying. Once this has been done, you can remove the roof if you want to do any work on the inside of the building, which might be useful depending on what you're going to be using it for. As you can see, it's all held together very nicely with some wood glue, and you can use any kind of PVA, I suppose speed bond or something like that would work very nicely. The next step, I put the small roof detailing part in place. Just make sure there's an equal distance all the way around the edge, just so it looks right. The next job is to fit the windows, and I'll be using some deluxe materials, glue and glaze for this. It's the perfect tool for the job. Remove the roof so you've got access to the inside of the building. Once you've fitted the glazing section into the frame with the glue and glaze, you can use some either more glue and glaze or just some regular wood glue and glue the window frames into the building. Approach this from the inside. They are thinner than the wall structure, so you want them flush with the inside of your building to allow future parts to be fitted to the outside. So just make sure that's correct. They are a very precise fit. Again, you might need to just either file down the outside of the window or potentially just the inside of the frame just to make sure they fit, but I didn't have too many problems. The smallest amount of glue will hold these in place. Just go careful, make sure that you don't break the windows, but you should find that they go in fairly easily. Once done, you should have a fairly nice looking window from the outside, and the detail should all still be showing with a small gap around it. After that, we're going to move on to the detailing around the windows and doors. These kind of ledges and lintels can all be cut out and put in place with a little bit of wood glue. As you can see, they're very, very delicate, so just go careful. You need the smallest amount of glue and it'll hold it in place. This is why we've primed these parts beforehand. As you'll see, it's a lot easier to paint them this way. The door lintel can be held in place while it dries with a small clamp, but don't put too much pressure on that. Before we put the outside cladding in place, I'm just going to do a test fit of the window panes and panels. This is how it's going to look, but they won't be fitted until I've installed the outer brick clad work. So just get yourself familiar and be prepared to put this in place. We're about to start the brick cladding on the outside. Just go careful with this. There are some sections where this is literally one brick thin, so it's very, very fragile. Do not rush this, otherwise you will end up with a broken brickwork, and at that point it's very, very difficult to hide it. Fitting the brickwork is fairly easy. It's just a case of applying a wood glue or a speed bond or something like that to the surface and then putting the brick piece in place. Do go careful with these. There are a few pieces that can only go in one way, and if you put them in the wrong way you'll be in trouble from there on out. I started on the north face, which is the face without any windows or doors, but this piece particularly has an up and a down. There's a section where there's a brick right at the bottom and not at the top. Make sure this is the right way round. If you put that section on the other way, it won't connect properly with the sides of the windows in that have to be one way up. Once you get that in place, hold it there with a clamp or something just to kind of make sure that it's all kind of held true, and you can kind of work then and effectively just move around the building until all the brick cladding is in place. The area you just need to spend the most time on is making sure that all the corners are aligned properly and the brick pieces fit on. It might have been easier, especially in double O gauge, to just prime the ends of these pieces before I'd done them a little bit more carefully. I do fix this later, but it would have made things a little bit easier. You can see that at the moment the colour of the bricks kind of makes those corners stand out a little bit better. But so if you're doing this, make sure you prime the ends of each piece as well. Very lightly though, to make sure that you're not clogging up those little gaps with paint. Here's the final result. As you can see, it's starting to really take shape now. Just the kind of detailing around the doors and windows to complete. As you can see with this piece, where it's come off from the main body of wood, there's a small burr that just needs to be filed down just to ensure a nice fit. It comes off very, very easily. Just take your time, a small file, and just make sure it's flat. It's a lot easier to work with then. With these sections, various faces are going to be on display, and the kind of side, if you will, of the piece of wood is a little bit darker, a little bit in need of more paint, otherwise it shows very obviously. If you've kept the spare bit of material from the door lintel, you can actually use this as a little holder. So each of these pieces will slot very nicely into that section and basically offer up the darker edge in the air, which gives you a kind of nice base to kind of paint from. So pop it in there and just give it another splash with the primer that you're going to be using, whether that be grey or in my case Plasticoat Suede. It just gives the kind of the sides a bit more kind of paint coverage, and this will look a lot better on the final model. Whilst I'm waiting for this to dry, I turn my attention back to the roof. The flat section has been fitted inside of the detailing rim, and I'm now adding PVA glue to that. On top of this, I put sand, which I will then take off to reveal kind of a gravel-like texture. This is finished with a quick spray of a grey primer, and it will give me a nice roof effect. Now that the window lintels and everything is dry, I'm able to start fitting them. Just a very, very small amount of PVA glue, and as we've done the dry fit earlier, it's easy to know where these sections go. Again, it's very much a case of less is more, so just take your time, use a very small amount of glue, and just take stock of what you're doing to make sure that all the parts are going to go in the way they're supposed to. This will need to be repeated on both sides of the building, as the windows are fairly identical. Once you're done, you'll have something that looks like this. Moving on to the door now, you'll see that there's a small kind of engraving for where the door was split by a metal panel. So just take this in mind when painting and mask up. You can obviously choose whatever colours you want. I've used a blue for a trans-rail kind of depot and a metallic section for the bottom. I use a couple of coats of blue just to kind of even out the paint. The very small kind of door windows can be removed and filed gently and then placed into position on the front of the door once the paint has dried. I would use some tweezers for this, and in terms of glue, I've used glue and glaze just in case any got on the glazing, but I didn't have too much of a problem. The door frame then can be put in place, again a tiny amount of glue, and then just pushed in place with a small blade or a cocktail stick or something, and you'll get a nice result. Take your time, obviously. This part is very, very fine and could easily tear as it's only cardboard. It's pretty much the final step then. If you want to, of course, you can glue the roof on, but I've decided not to do that for various reasons that I will get into in just a minute. You can just have any last minute touch-ups with a paintbrush, and then you'll have a result that looks something like this. It's a very, very nice little building, and will look pretty much in place on any depot for various uses. You can leave it like this, however, I've decided to add a little bit more detailing. The original was a pump house of some description, so I've picked up some pipe parts from Walters. This is an HO scale kit, but really for something like a pipe you won't notice any difference. I'm going to be replicating the pumps or the pipes that were on the original that will probably appear just here, but with these pipes it's very easy to work with. Just file off any burrs and then you can use a plastic weld or something like that to kind of put the pieces together. Once they've been put together and painted, I've just used a drop of super glue to get them in place, and they really look the part. As this is going to be a pump room and the windows are quite large, I do need to kind of stop people seeing in, as I'm not going to build a pump. So a little bit of matte varnish on the inside of the windows will fog those up nicely and stop people being able to see in too much. The other thing that I've done with the kit is to add a mortar effect by using some easy plaster. I've popped that on there, just kind of rubbed it between the gaps, a slightly watered down version, and then cleaned it up to leave the mortar lines. I've added some general weathering and some kind of streaking, especially along the bottom. There's been some kind of darker colours where the kind of moisture would be in the ground coming up through. The other thing that I've done is to add a light. When I drilled that hole earlier in the process, it was to be able to feed up wires through. So I've used a micro LED with some resistors in, and that gives a kind of nice little light level. That was the other reason I decided to use a frosted glass, because I knew that the inside would be very visible from the outside without it. So I hope that video has shown how to put the kit together, and also really what a versatile little building it is. Obviously I've used it as a pump room, but it could easily be a small office, a storeroom. Even people have suggested it could be an outside toilet. So very useful building that, like I said, I think can be kind of used on almost any depot or kind of railway side that you can think of, really. I'm a big fan of railway laser line kits, and this one's certainly no exception. The build quality is fantastic. Level of detail for such a small kit is very good, and the construction is fun but not difficult. It's very achievable for kind of any level of modeler. At the price that it's going to be, which is $19.99, it's pretty much a no-brainer, I think, for a lot of people to kind of try and include on their layout, and maybe it's a nice introduction to building kits like this. It's going to be discounted by 10% for the first week, as with most of Steve's kits. So head over to the link in the description below and check out what he does, not only this kit but other buildings as well. Like I said at the beginning of the video, this kit was sent to me for free. The link below is not an affiliate link. I don't get anything else from it other than having this review sample, and that's it really. So just to be clear on that. Thanks very much for joining me. I hope you've enjoyed the video, and I hope that you check out Steve's kits and see if there's anything that interests you. Thanks very much. Goodbye.